Alright, let me show you what I'm using to do homebrewing. I like to use the Preassure. This is a 35 liter. I like this one more if you compare it to the Grandfather. The Grandfather is a 30 liter, this is a 35. That means to the broom. So you can't boil 35 liters, you just make a mess. So the max you can go here is 30 to 32, around there. If you use the Grandfather 30 liter, then the broom will be here. So you can only boil 27-26 liters max. I just like more headspace, because while you're boiling your wort, it might get rough in there, tumbling around, and if it spills out, then you just make a mess all the way down on your table. So I like some headspace, so it can boil on full power without cooking over. The other thing you need, this is a pump. This one is integrated inside. It's very neat. The Grandfather has it on the outside and a huge control box on the top. I just like it compact. This one I can wash it outside with a pressure washer, outside, inside, in this pipe, flush out the pump, even when the water runs down on the side. They're not pressure washer tight, but they will not leak in. If you see, it's like sticky, or it's yeah, it's a very good cover for the plugs. Even this face here. The third thing that I like a lot, this is the cam lock. If you use the Grandfather, you have to screw with the black knob. This one just fits right in there. There you go. Good. You can adjust the flow all the way around, no problem. Tap, of course. And the other thing, you usually get a spoon that you can stir your mash with. I just use a stainless steel bar. I just feel that it's, well, while you are stirring the mash, there's a lot of resistance in there. It's very heavy to stir anything if you have a spoon with a big head. But with so little resistance, I can take both hands on there and stir very good. I've never had a problem with that. One of the other things that is important is to have a wort chiller. I like these much more over the counterflow chiller. The counterflow is very quick and it does the job very effectively. But with this wort chiller, if you have the hot wort, it's going pretty quick from 100 down to 20-25 degrees. And while that is happening, all the trub is falling down and settling at the bottom on the filter. You've seen that on some other videos. Compared to the counterflow chiller, then you are pumping out very hot wort right into your fermenter, and that has the effect that you don't get that good downfall. So all the trub that usually ends up on my filter ends up in your fermenter and taking up a lot of space. So it just gives me much more control. On my setup, I went away from using buckets. I don't use those anymore. Usually the fermentation time is about 2 weeks. I don't have that time. So I'm going over to, or I went over to the from Zillow. This is the 27 liter, and on that machine you can make beer kits with 25 liters, like this one here. And so you're transferring 25 to 26 liters of wort into your fermenter. And this little headspace, that's more than enough, because the kraus doesn't rise that high when you're fermenting under pressure. As soon as you let down the pressure, this becomes much more. So don't worry about 27 liters being too small for a 25 liters batch and think that the 2 liters is gonna make that big of a difference. There's no problem. It's maybe 10 to 15 millimeters at the max. Here's a ton of dry hops in here, so it's a little bit more, but it doesn't make a difference at all. So I have 25 liters in here now, but because of the pressure, it drops. So as soon as I let off the pressure, it will rise again to 25. There is one other that I would choose above this one. I feel personally that I don't need this function here to dry hop. When you are doing dry hops, I usually just I feel that it's much more efficient to just let off the pressure, unscrew the cap, dump in the hops, screw it again, and then flush it and pressurize with some CO2 like this. So you get a regulator and a ball knob valve, and I can top up pressure, flush it, top up, flush it, so all the oxygen that you think you're getting in there will be flushed out. So this takes up unnecessary space. I don't need that. Yeah. So you also get from Zillow, it's a 50 or a 60 liter, but if you're taking up only half of that, if you use a small brewing machine like that, then you can't go that much. Then you have to upgrade your machine to a bigger capacity. But you get one that's called an allrounder. That one is just round at the bottom. So you don't have all these extra equipment at the bottom, and you can get it as low as half this space. So it's just a luxury to dump some trub, which I usually do. Nothing more than that actually. I usually just put all my add-ins on the top. Gelatin and dry hops and some extra sugar or whatever. So this is really unnecessary. You can get a much lower version. You can fit it in a much smaller space like this. This one is half the size. I just have this extra just to store some of my next brews. So the 27 liter allrounder will fit perfectly in there. My setup here is that you get the from Zillow 27 liter with the pressure kit. That is that you get a spunding valve with in this where you can regulate your pressure, so it won't go above a certain level, but it also has a emergency release on 2.4 bar, 2.5, something like that. But I don't ferment under that pressure, and I don't use that because it's much better and safer, and you really need a spunding valve. Other than that, my heating element, it's a belt heating element. It's working perfectly fine. You can have it directly on your from zillow without doing any damage at all. It's not that hot and it's directly in contact with the fluid inside your beer in the making. No problems at all, ever. So don't worry about that. Just don't use a light bulb to heat up. You will melt the sides. Neither that nor a fan. Not any other heating element. You don't need anything more than this. This works perfectly fine. I just, for my temperature control, you get these on eBay. It's maybe 100 crowns, $10, I don't know. And I just wired it on the thermostat wiring. I just plug that out, cut the hole, and wire directly onto that wires. As well as a cooling fan on the cooling circuit. Not a cooling fan, but it's a desktop fan circulating the cool air. As soon as this element cools down, like this for example, let me just drop the temperature. There we go. This will circulate the air behind there, down and up again. And it works perfect. I can cool down to 1 degrees because I'm not steering the integrated cooling system or a temperature meter or thermostat. I'm steering the pump itself on the fridge, so I can run it constantly if necessary. Just adjust this temperature back. Should be on 27 degrees for now. There we go. Temperature probe. You just tape it on the side, some cover on the outside. So, what more? I like to use a refractometer while I'm brewing, because I don't need to wait that long for the usual hydrometer samples to cool. So what you will do is, so when you want to measure your gravity while you're brewing, and if you use a hydrometer like this, then you need to wait until, or cool your sample until it's 20 degrees. And that can take half an hour for 100 milliliters like this. So the big advantage is that you can just either dip this in the wort or drop a little sample on the scope there, and then you will get a perfect and accurate reading on your right hand side there. You will have a blue line. But you can't use a hydrometer to measure the gravity of your beer because it's got alcohol content in it. So you will get a very weird reading and it's not accurate. You usually get something like 1025, 1030 when it's done, fermented. So if you want to use a hydrometer, you need to use the bricks scale on the left hand side, and then go on the internet, find a calculator or converter from bricks to final gravity. But to measure the gravity, the easiest and best way is to use hydrometer. This for brewing, this for beer. Final gravity after it's fermented or during it's fermented. Let's see. This is called the party tap. This just pops onto the top there. I want to press it in right now, otherwise I get some trouble in my lines. So this is usually sold separately. It's just a black bollock valve, hose and the party tap. You get sets of these which are very long or very short. It doesn't really affect anything. It's just that you need to know that when you are going to serve beer from your fermenter, you need to drop your pressure. Otherwise it will foam everywhere and you will just pull everything out. So not even 0.5 bar, but it's 0.3 bar. So you'll, when you want to serve, just pull that out if it's too high and drop it to 0.3 bar, and then you can serve. Usually it will just rise up again a little bit more if you cool this down to 6 degrees, 7 degrees. But once your beer is carbonated, it will stay carbonated during the next 2 weeks while you're emptying or serving from your fermenter. So in theory you don't need to top up your pressure. You don't need the CO2 gas to top up. Here it's naturally carbonating. Within 2 to 3 days it's fully carbonated, but to absorb all that CO2, then you need to cool. So there's a video coming where I just pull this up to stir. When I release, then it's just foaming. And that is what's gonna happen if you try to serve warm beer. But you cool it down, drop the pressure, and then you can serve. Even if your beer line is thick or thin, it will work as long as you have the right pressure. Yeah. Alright, to wrap it up, if you want to do exactly the way I do, you can do even better. You can be more compact. Like I said, you don't need 2 fridges. You can just use a small one if you use the small fermenter. But first thing first, it's the Preassure Generation 3 with a pump. Of course, it's the 35 liters. Works perfect. You get the wort chiller with when you buy it. Another thing that is important to have is a thermometer like this, exactly like this, because when you are cooling down the beer, all the trub is sinking down to the bottom, and then it's lying on top of your temperature probe, which is down at the bottom in the center. This is the temperature probe, and if there's a lot of trub lying around here covering it, you'll get incorrect temperature readings from your display. So that's why I have a temperature meter, which I just hook onto the side, right into the center, while I have the pump on, circulating, cooling the wort, so I know exactly where to stop for whirlpool hops, that's 80 degrees, or when I am done and ready to transfer it into my Zillow at 25 degrees. I don't recommend more than that. The other thing that you need, of course, star sand, is to keep things clean. The spray bottle, this works perfect. You can just pump it up. Some brewing gloves, hydrometer, something to stir. Could be a wooden spoon, stainless steel spoon, anything. Refractometer, that's very I highly recommend that. You will need, of course, a spoon and a scissor to cut the yeast. You need a gram scale. Some of the recipes only gives you 100. Yeah, well, if you do buy sets, you get the hops in certain quantities and they put all the hop amounts in one, and then you need to weigh out the hops. The other thing, after brewing, you need to clean up. I just use the pressure washer, and then afterwards I mix some water into my brewing machine and I wash it, as well as my Preassure. I wash it and stuff. Sparkling water, CO2 canister. These you buy almost everywhere. The regulator you need to buy at the brew shop. The hose and the ball-lock valve, usually it's a kit, so you get all three of these together when you buy it. Then you need some grease to grease fittings. If you're gonna go for this, you need to grease up the fittings, otherwise they will get stuck. So if you use this, it's a food grade, it's food safe. You can use that to grease up all the fittings, even the ball-lock valves inside there, right here needs to be some grease. Some other things, gelatin. This is what I use to clear my beer. Half a teaspoon and half a cup of water. Boil the water, stir it in, and I add it hot, not cold. I add it hot because I want it to float to the top and rain down or sink down from the top, taking with it all the drop. So it's a very, very, very effective way. Crystal clear. Works every time. Some whirlpool tablets, that is to clear the beer. You add this 15 minutes before you're done cooling your wort. Sorry, not cooling, but 15 minutes before you're done cooking or boiling. It's not necessary, not at all. Not even the yeast supplements, you don't need that. This is something that comes with your Preassure to unscrew. And yeah, this is I'm not exactly sure what you call it, but it's insulated. 2 liters, I can take it out on a boat trip, serve from there. I don't need bottles, it's too much of a hassle. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything more, just let me know if you need to get some more info. Now, last thing, well, it's very good to have a bucket to put your grain after the mash. You take your grain right into the bucket. That's the only use it has, and some washing maybe, but yeah, that's all. Works perfect. There's a lot that you need to do wrong for the beer not to work. You just need to know that it needs everything you touch after your boiling needs to be sanitized with star sand. You need to flush this with star sand before you transfer. Yeah. Keep it out of sunlight. Not sure if there's anything more. You can complicate this process extremely if you read too much and do too little. You really learn a lot while you're brewing. You don't need to know everything under the sun to make this work. I've put up videos before. One of the big advantages you have with this system here is that you can ferment, or you can brew on a Monday evening, then you can transfer it, and it will go 3 days of fermentation. Then it will start clearing up after itself, falling down. On day 4 and 5 you use to cold crash down to 2 degrees, So by the time you get to Friday, then you could serve finished beer, finished carbonated and cooled. So I like to not have to wait 3 to 4, 5 or 6 weeks if you use the bucket system. Here it's 5 days. You can even cut it shorter if you have a weaker beer, but what I found with this, I did a Belgian triple. That's a very strong beer, a very high ABV, and it took me 6 days from start of fermentation till I have clear beer in my glass. 6 days. So I recommend.